It's the final word, New Zealand Australia Daily, day 0 of Christchurch. The preview day, it's apparently 27 degrees. It's the most summery of summer days that we've had in our time in New Zealand. The sky is blue. Adam Collins, Jeff Lemon for CBUS Super. You don't have to do it in 30 seconds, but you can tell us about Pat Cummins' press conference. We just heard from the Australian captain. Pretty much the usual stuff straight down the line as you would expect. But I don't know, was there anything of interest in there for you?
It's good. It's gorgeous, isn't it? I've got a sweat on, which is unusual. When I filmed this, not for the final word, but Brian Waddle and I were recording a preview video at Christchurch in 2016, and the tripod tipped over. No risk of that happening today. It's a bit of ASMR stuff behind us. They're smashing in the malleting in the hole for the stumps and painting the marks on this, what looks to be a belter of a track. We went out there yesterday and it was really green, and we asked them about the 12 millimetres of grass, not 16 as there was at the basin, all of the rest of it. But just the sniff test, you're looking at it here and you're like, that's going to be a pitch that's going to generate, hopefully, plenty of runs and a great contest between ball and bat. This ground, over the 10 years they've been playing Test cricket here, hasn't really favoured one discipline or the other. There have been scores in excess of 600, and there have been teams rock and rolled in 3 days. So that suggests that if all things are equal, it should be a great Test match. The press conferences, Australia unchanged. Mitchell Starc playing a test which will see him hopefully overtake Dennis Lilly for wickets. He's on 354 at the moment. And that was a major theme of what Cummins was talking about today, that the 3 quicks, when they started at Brisbane, we interviewed Pat before that test match, and he's like, well, it's improbable we'll be able to get us through the whole Australian summer. And then thinking about New Zealand, we all thought there'd be some jiggery-pokery at some stage. They've not needed to do it. All the breaks have come at good times. They've been able to get some R&R. They've been able to finish test matches inside 4 days. No test has gone to 5 days at this stage throughout the 6 they've played. And it means that the big 3, Cummins, Hazelwood and Starc, go at it again. And I think that'll be quite significant when Starc goes past Lilly into what will be 4th spot for Australia, I think.
Sounds
I'm
about right.
saying. And just ignoring what position it is, like that number 355, Australian fast bowling, it's been held up for, generations now as a marker of greatness. And Starc has earned that kind of praise given the way he's prioritised Test cricket and been such a staple of the side since 2011.
How many wickets did Mitchell Starc get, though, in World Series cricket? None. It was it was tough. I don't count as first class wickets though, not for Dennis. No, can't have that. Right, so all of that. It's hard to know what to make of this. You get the usual Christchurch thing where it is green. Even now,
it's more a tinge though, isn't it?
It's less green than it was yesterday, but it's still very green when you go up and look at it close up.
Do you think so? Maybe I've been here for too long now. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that's not really that green. I mean, by Australian standards, yes, but compared to the basin last week where it was like a coral. It was like a dark green.
Right.
This is a tinge.
A pastel green.
Yeah, this is
it's the green
baggy
of the insides of those clinkers. Those sweets that you bite open and they've got that weird sort of foam sea green. It's still green, but the point I'm going on to make is that as we've talked about before with New Zealand, that can be very cosmetic. It's probably a belter anyway, and you can maybe get a little bit from it on the first morning, but you remember coming here in 2016 and going, oh, that's green, oh, it's doing a bit, and then McCullum makes 100 off 50 balls. Not too green to do that, basically.
Session 1, 8 years ago, it did do a lot early on, but as Pat said at his press conference then, they're not expecting it to be like the Gabba, which is like movement that means that every ball, there's a lot riding on it because there is the jeopardy there. It doesn't feel...
You mean the difficult Gabba, not the flat Gabba, because the Gabba has two faces as well.
Yeah, the traditional, like going up for a Shield game or Test matches, or a Test match that we saw 18 months ago or so at that ground in Brisbane. But yeah, here, I keep looking at it over your shoulder at the moment. My instinct is that this will be the kind of pitch that does allow a side to bat first with confidence. Again, Cummins today said when making a decision at the toss around batting or fielding first, he tries to weigh it up. When's it going to be harder to bat, in the 4th innings or the 1st innings? Which I think is not a bad metric to work on that basis.
I think he's the most bowl first captain I've ever seen. He wants to bowl first a lot. His instinct is to bowl first a lot of the time, and sometimes it works great, like in the World Cup final. In Test matches, he's very inclined to, even in Wellington, they were asked to bat first, but he was wanting to bowl first if he'd had the chance, the same as Southee. There have been quite a few tests, unless he's just messing with us, there have been quite a few where he loses the toss and gets asked to bat and says, well, I would have chosen to bowl.
Yeah, I feel like, I haven't crunched the numbers, but I'd be surprised if there's a captain in the last 50 years who's bowled as frequently as Cummins, and that goes to pitchers as well, being perhaps a bit more generous to bowlers in Australia than they were under the Smith leadership, when typically we were looking at total feather beds and so on, and Payne as well. So That's the bigger picture there. But yeah, with New Zealand, they've yet to really land their 11. So Mitchell Suttner and Scott Kugelheim, it's going to be between those two. As it was at Wellington, the difference this time is that Will O'Rourke has been ruled out, as we knew before we arrived here. Ben Sears into the squad, straight into the 11. Bowled well in those T20s and bowled at pace. They think he can hit the radar well into the 140s, and he's tall. So a nice like for like there for O'Rourke, given they need something of a point of difference. No Wagner, no left armour. My instinct is if they think there'll be runs in this pitch, then Suttner might have a better chance of playing this week than last week. And the Australians have been preparing for that. They've had Daniel Vittori doing a lot of drills with him in the nets the last 2 days with that left arm spin option. So I think that Suttner in would be more likely than not.
Yep, Sears and Roebuck perhaps we can go with the catalogue they'll call it. He'll deliver something for everyone. New Zealand hope that he will. Big game for Southee and Williamson with the 100th tests, and the fact that that's coming. Both of them coming together, it's all very nice and symbolic. They played their 50th together, they'll play their 100th together. They didn't debut together, quite a few years apart. Southee debuted in 2008, didn't he?
It's incredible longevity.
Long time ago.
Yeah, we go on a lot about Jimmy's longevity, and rightly so. I mean, he's 42 this year. But with Southee making his debut in 2008, Anderson didn't play a lot of Test cricket before 06-07. No. So, they're almost
contemporaneous.
They're almost contemporaneous. Not quite on age. I know Southee's a lot younger and debuted a lot younger too, but still.
But in career terms, so when it was put to Cummins, he said, it's really impressive that he's been able to beat that standard for the last 12 years or so.
And the rest.
It's like, no, more like 16. Yeah. Because you guys, like the Australian team, you play so many more test matches. You have such a more condensed test match calendar compared to New Zealand with fewer opportunities. That he's effectively played regularly for almost as long as James Anderson has, as only a year or two difference in terms of being a pretty much first choice fixture in the team, and has played about 85 fewer test matches in that period of time. It's extraordinary how it shows the disparity between what the big three teams get and what everybody else gets. And there was some writing going on about this, looking at the way that players in the modern era, basically the big three players, are playing most of their tests against each other, which mirrors the way it used to be in, say, the 30s or 40s when it was the same sort of thing, where Bradman played almost all of his tests against England, that sort of thing. Yeah.
And look, with Southee, the other point to this is that he's walking into his milestone match a little bit under the pump, both as a bowler, having not taken many wickets across the 3 test matches New Zealand have played in the last month against South Africa and last week. And he had a bad test match across the board, and then Ross Taylor had a pretty hefty go at him on television back in Australia in reference to his second innings dismissal, in reference to his
not
bowling,
Wagner.
In reference to the Wagner, air quotes, forced retirement. I think there's a bit much made of that, by the way. I mean, clearly Wagner, anyone who follows this stuff closely, Wagner was picked for the squad, overtaken by O'Rourke and Kugelheim ultimately, but O'Rourke especially in the 11, and he pulled the pin. Maybe he made the decision. How much of that was Wagner saying, well, stuff it, I'm pulling the pin now? Might it have been that had Wagner not made that decision, had he just been 12th man last week, that he might be playing this week? So I don't know whether all of that rides with Southee, but it's unusual that we'd be coming into a player's 100th test press conference, which is usually a fairly celebratory affair, and he copped about 10 questions from the New Zealand press pack around critical stuff in recent days. So, there's that edge coming into the test for him as well. On the other side of it, Williamson's presser yesterday was very straight bat, as you would anticipate from Kane, who's never really given a media line. It's not the way he's hardwired. But would love to do something against Australia, having not done anything against Australia since 2015.
Yeah, there is definitely edge around it, and it's interesting because New Zealand always like to project an air of harmony. But it was sort of odd that Cummins got asked about the Ross Taylor comments and just gave absolutely nothing. Said I have no thoughts on that. But what are your thoughts on this? No thoughts was his answer. Fair enough. But the thing with Southee, the fact that it comes down to, like you're saying, a Wagner versus Kugelheim thing, aside from all the other reasons that Kugelheim shouldn't be in this team or in this squad, he's not really that good as a cricketer. It seemed odd to say that you're going to put him in rather than Neil Wagner, who, yes, he's tapered off over the last year or so, but he had such a good record against Australia last time around, good against Steve Smith. That just seemed like a no-brainer. And then to not entertain the possibility of having him in the squad, it's very open to interpretation that there is other stuff going on there. Kugelheim's supposedly very close with Southee, and Wagner apparently isn't. So whether or not that is a factor, whether or not that is an influence, they leave themselves open to the interpretation that it is.
Yeah, Southee was asked about his relationship with Wagner, and he said that they all love him and they've been teammates forever, and he acknowledged his contribution. So he kind of knocked that on the head pretty quickly and said that it was very emotional in the dressing room at Basin Reserve when they had their celebration for him the other day. It was at this ground where Wagner and Smith started. It faded into the backdrop because Smith made 138. Wagner took 6 for, though, and a lot of it was bouncer war stuff here before we even really had that as the plan B in Test cricket. I mean, the short ball's always been part of Test cricket, but what I'm describing is the sustained fast medium bouncer wall, trying to get it up towards the rib cage and between the helmet for 4 to 5 or 6 even balls and over, with 4 or 5 fielders set back both, the fly slip, fine leg, deep backward square leg right in front of the square leg umpire, a couple of other catches at mid wicket, often a third man or a deep backward point. Short leg, you got it. That's probably the first time I'd seen that configuration,
right?
And it was to Smith. Smith got through it that day.
It was like modern bodyline. How do we do bodyline within the constraints of the only 2 behind square leg?
Exactly. And now we didn't see it at Wellington, surprisingly, but in most Test matches that we cover now, at some stage, one team or the other will pull that lever. Wagner started that here all those years ago when Joe Burns rattled off 170. There's a nice piece of social media doing the rounds, I'm not sure who it was from, where they were asking the current team who was the 11 for the 11 in Christchurch in 16. There's some rogue names were thrown out there. I mean, it does feel like a long time ago, and I suppose it was.
Joe Burns was opening the batting. Adam Voges was in that.
This was the test where Voges, this means nothing now, but I like this little factoid. It was his 20th test innings, and that's the number that Cricinfo classifies statistically as when your career is real. Numerical
when
purposes.
You get counted on
when
the
you
average
get counted,
list.
That's the better way of saying it. And in that 20th innings, Voges, when he reached 60 from memory, went beyond Bradman. His average was an even 100. He was out shortly thereafter, and it went back to 97 or something like that.
I reckon he peaked at like 101 and a half or something.
It was about that. I remember screen grabbing it when he hit exactly 100 and saying, for the first time in Test history, someone is, by definition,
player.
Better than Bradman, if only for a moment.
And he should have walked off. He should have just walked off and retired at that moment. Hamstring. I've got to retire. Retire hurt. So it's a not out. Red ink. Leave the average up there.
Done.
And I'm done. Thank you guys. It's been great. It's been a great pleasure. Been an honour to play for Australia. No sense going on and wrecking this beautiful set of numbers. I think even with the 61 that he ended up averaging, I think Adam Voges is a bit sheepish about that because he sort of feels like he didn't have that long a span and all the rest of it, but he was a wonderful player in the time he played.
A couple of other bits and pieces this week. Tonight we're going to a function to recognise the 50th anniversary of New Zealand winning their first Test match against Australia in Christchurch in 74. Of course, not here, over at Lancaster Park, but Glenn Turner's twin sons.
Which doesn't exist anymore. It's a paddock now, Lancaster Park.
It was knocked down since the last time we were here. It was condemned by them, but it's been formally bulldozed now, which is sad for a whole range of reasons. But at that ground, or in the city, was where New Zealand saluted for the first time, and Jeremy was part of that team, Bevan Condon's team, and Glenn Turner's twin sons, and Kerry O'Keefe not getting a bowl in either innings always comes up too, and the Hagley brothers, I think Richard took 7 and Dale took 6 across the 2 innings, so they took 13 of the 20 Australian wickets. So we'll get a chance.
Jim Maxwell in the combox last week. Kerry said he could have got Glenn Turner out with a soggy tomato.
Well, didn't get the opportunity to that week, but we'll be in there later. I don't know. We might try and put the microphone under some of those New Zealand champions of yesteryear, and more generally,
if we could get Michael Bevan and Bevan Condon together, maybe to do a podcast or something.
Now we're talking.
The Bevans.
Yeah, there's another Bevan I can think of who I never want to make a podcast. But it's something about Christchurch. Like it's a proper cricket city. I know Wellington's the cradle of cricket in New Zealand, but this is special being here, and I do feel that sorrow that it's been so long, and I do think that talking to the Australian players, they feel that too. Like they don't want it to be this long between drinks. Unfortunately, though, in the next FTP, the next time they play each other is 26-27, and guess where it is? Australia. So we are going to have to wait to see it, but hopefully, just being out here last week, Nick Hockley and other Australian board members and all the rest of it, they'll be like, no, this is a priority to be over here. And hopefully by that stage, we're talking about 3 Test match series, not just 2, so we can get to somewhere else beyond Wellington and Christchurch.
I guess they've got to work it out because it's usually this time of year, and so next year they've got Sri Lanka at this time of year. The year after that, it's Bangladesh? No, 2027 there's a Bangladesh. They cut 2 tests against Bangladesh, but at home around this time of year?
They're playing him earlier. They're playing him in late 26, October 26, I think it is. Then playing India before the Sesquicentenary.
On the FTP, they've got the the 5-test tour to India, and then they're supposed to host Bangladesh for a couple. They're flipping that around.
Yeah, that's right. So they're going to have Bangladesh over in the top end test before the official summer starts.
Right.
Play the 4 tests against New Zealand, then go to India to play 5, then come back to Australia to play 1 against England.
Christ.
It's going to be one hell of a summer. Then we go to England for an Ashes series.
Then there'll be a 50 over World Cup.
Can't stop, won't stop. That might be the right time for us to pivot onto the not the Final Word Hall of Fame, but let's take a beat. Final Word Hall of Fame
could be the Hall of Fame.
Is for cbussuper.com.au. 8.89%. 8.89%.
It's 2 8
1.21 gigawatts.
Yep.
1.21 gigawatts.
We should work out a nerd pledge for 889.
There you go. I'd love you to send it in, and we can tell you more about the returns of CBUS across their 40-year stretch. 50 years since New Zealand had that result over here. 40 years since CBUS Super started. What happened in 1984 for New Zealand cricket? Off the top of my head, I don't know. Oh no, that was the Pakistan series at the Basin where Ewan Chatfield walked out.
Yes.
And had that extraordinary last wicket performance with Jeremy Kane, where they saw them over the line with
after
Chatfield
having knocked out,
been nearly died playing a test match against England a year or two before. So that happened in 1984 for New Zealand cricket. But in 1984 for superannuation, that's where employers and employees came together with the innovative policy solution, superannuation, industry funds, which we've told you about throughout the summer, and the call to action, get your super sorted out. Easy to do. Link in the show notes to their website. Come directly to Jeff and me if you wish for us to give you a rocket handball into the head office.
A 40-metre handball.
And we can do a poly farmer straight into the top floor of the building that CBUS work in. That's what we can do for you. cbussuper.com.au, past performance, not a reliable indicator. Future performance.
Mixing our sporting metaphors here. 84 New Zealand were preparing for 85, where they started beating Australia, 85, 86. So, the returns came with the groundwork laid in 84.
Very good.
That's what it's all about. What do we got? I mean, Hall of Fame, it's just nice to be able to be out here near the middle of the pitch without being tackled by security guards like we would be in most other countries. New Zealand's much more laid back. They're like, nah, it's fun. Go and check it out. Have a squiz. What do you? Yeah, no worries.
I've got some evidence of that from last night. So last night we were playing over at the nursery ground here at Hagley 2, the media game. My captaincy is under profound threat, having been beaten comfortably. I made a couple of poor decisions
of the media 11
inside the power. I fully acknowledge I made some bad calls inside the power play, and we paid for it. Life will go on. Lovely pitch, not too dissimilar to the pitch here. The ground staff here made that one for us. Bless them. Lovely guys, actually. A couple of them played. One of our Final Word pals, Thomas Miles, we were short a player. We lost a player about an hour before. Alex Malcolm would have been handy. Nearly played first-class cricket. Nearly debuted in the Shield final. Anyway, he wasn't playing. And Thomas said, I've just got off the plane. He's played for our Final Word 11 before in Melbourne. Throws himself around, enthusiastic, not a bad bone in his body. One of the loveliest people you'll ever meet. And he just found his way into the ground, told the security guards that he was playing at Hagley. He's like, oh, you must be in here. You must be on the main ground. Then he had to, as you witnessed, climb a tree to get into our game?
Yeah, well, so there was a whole lot of temporary fencing, and he was stuck on the stadium side, and I could see him going up and down like a dog in a run, looking for a hole in the wire that he'd get through, and there wasn't one. And you were all having a chat, and then the next thing I saw him sprinting up and then disappearing up a tree, like ran up the trunk of a tree and vanished into it, and then somehow found his way across some branches over the other side and dropped down and then rolled down a hill into the dry creek bed, and then popped up like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And still came out, bowled with some pace and fielded brilliantly.
Took 2 ripping catches. And speaking of great catches, remiss of us not to mention Basilenko. Bharat yesterday has taken an absolute screamer. So we had Xavier Doherty playing for us, who's working with you on the ABC in these 2 test matches. We've got Chris Harris working with us on SEN and SENZ this week. He was playing for the New Zealand media. By the way, Harry was playing first grade cricket as recently as 2 years ago as a 52-year-old, so still plays properly, right?
Yeah, bowled very nicely. Bowled a maiden to Corbin Middlemouse,
bowled
who was batting well.
Exactly as you'd remember Chris Harris. It used to come up on Channel 9, right arm slow. Not a thing has changed. Very effective.
A little unscrewing the light bulb action as he'd sort of whip them out the back of the fingers.
And opening the batting, he is bludgeoned a pull shot off Thomas Stockley. Gave from CA, given it absolutely everything to Baz at square leg. It has ballooned off his heart into the air it's ballooned up by like 3 feet. And Bharat's done 3 separate juggles before grasping it to his sternum. Harris gone for a duck, and you should... actually, we might drop a little photo if Jeff feels like it. Drop a little photo here on the YouTube of Baz's chest this morning. It's a welt. Yeah. You can see the seam and the bruising alongside the left-hand side. We'll put it this way, he put his heart into it for us.
Yeah, he did. You can do it if you put your ass into it, which luckily he didn't have to, because that would have been even more painful had it wedged. But yeah, it's extraordinary. There's kind of raised skin all around it. There's literally an imprint of the cricket ball. It's like a cartoon situation where someone gets hit by something and then it's imprinted into their face or whatever it is. It's like the iron in Home Alone. So yeah, and he put himself there. He was like, Chris Harris likes to play the pull shot and it usually goes just behind square. So he moved himself across a couple of metres and was right in the spot for it as soon as it dropped short.
It was great pod fodder for him, as it will be with comms this week, because Harry's working with us this week. He came and gave Brad a big hug at square leg as the catch was taken. So all played in great spirit. New Zealand 11 get over the line, and we'll live to fight.
Got over the line about 10 overs early.
Let's not talk about the result. We'll live to fight another day.
I'm just going to say one thing. How many weeks did Chris Harris take? None. How many did Xavier Doherty take? None. How many did I take? One.
Jeff bowled well. Jeff bowled well. Okay, enough indulgence for one podcast. There'll be more of that, I'm sure, in the week to come. If you want to follow what's going on in Dharamshala, not Dharamshala as Cam keeps saying, Dharamshala. Sorry, Cam, drive-by there for you. You'll be able to pick up the daily programs Stumps with him and Daniel Norcross across the next 3 or 4 or 5 days, however long that test match takes. And we'll be back, of course, each night at Stumps from Hagley Oval in Christchurch for CBUS Super, cbussuper.com.au. Can't wait. It's lovely here.
See ya.
Bye.